2020 has been a really difficult year, but if there's one good thing to come out of it, it's how many excellent phones were released this year. Not only do you have great phones at the high end, but you also have great phones at the mid-range, anywhere between $400 and $700 that really compete with flagships and provide a really compelling experience. Now, I thought it was only fitting to end the year with a Phones Under 500 Season 2 finale. And so I've got 5 phones in front of me to compete for just that. We've got the OnePlus 8, the Xiaomi Mi 10T, the Samsung Galaxy S20FE, the LG V60, and the iPhone 11. Now, all of these phones can be found for around $500 if you look long enough. Now, obviously, it's going to be tougher to find these 3, but if you look for factory refurbished models on eBay or something similar, you should be able to find it. So keep that in mind, and we'll keep that in mind when we come to the final conclusion. Now, these 5 phones are going to be graded on the 6 categories that appear on screen. Each one of them is going to be assigned between 0 and 3 stars in each category, and then we'll tally the results at the end, and we'll decide which is the best phone under 500. Keep tally of your own scores down in the comments, and let me know what you think is going to be the best phone under $500. And remember, this is very much subjective. A lot of this is based off of my personal preferences, and with that, we'll just get right into it. Let's start with the displays. The iPhone 11 has a great OLED panel, which is a huge upgrade over the LCDs in former iPhones. But I will say that the notch really gets in the way of content for me, and I'm not a big fan of how much it takes up. And then, in addition to that, it is only a 60 Hz screen when several other of the phones here have higher refresh rate displays. And so for that reason, I'm only going to give it 1 star. The LG V60 also has a 60 Hz OLED panel, which is decent for 1080p, but it really can't stand up to some of the other screens released this year. And so for that reason, I'm going to give it 1 star. The Galaxy S20FE is an absolutely incredible 120 Hz OLED panel that I love to use. And the best thing for me is the fact that it's flat, and so I don't have any issues with accidental edge touches, which really, really mars my experience for a display. And so for that reason, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Xiaomi notably opted for an LCD panel in their Mi 10T this year. And the reasoning was to get to 144 Hz. While 144 Hz is nice, I really, really don't like this display, and I've had a lot of issues with it. And so for that reason, I'm only going to give it 1 star. And then finally, the OnePlus 8 has a 120 Hz incredible OLED display, but it's got curved edges, which really frustrates me. And so for that reason, I'm only going to give it 2 stars here. So now let's get to the most subjective of subjective categories in design. The iPhone 11, while it visually looks appealing, I think it feels a little bit cheap in the hand because of its thickness and its heaviness. And so for that reason, I'm probably only going to give it 1 star. The LG V60 has at least a unique color scheme with the gold and blue, though I think it's also pretty heavy and thick, and so for that reason, I'll give it 2 stars. Surprisingly, the Galaxy S20FE is one of my favorite design phones this year. And that's a combination of the visual design and the ergonomics, because I think it fits really well in my hand and it's very easy to hold on to. While I appreciate the frosted back glass panel of the Mi 10T, and I think the visual design of the back is pretty good, once I actually pick it up in my hand, I'm disappointed. Because not only does it feel thick and kind of cheap, but also the bottom bezel is actually quite a bit bigger than the others, and so it looks like a cheaper phone. And so as a result, I'm only going to give this a 1 star. And then finally, the OnePlus 8 has this incredible visual design. Now, I have the Sunrise model, and so it's got this striking color gradient that looks really pretty. I think it's a little flashy at times and a little gaudy at times, but for the most part, the visual and aesthetic design is very nice. Now, I will say that it's slightly less comfortable to hold than the S20FE for me because of the curved glass panels and the sharp edges, but it still is a pretty good ergonomic phone, and so for that reason, I will give it 3 stars. Now I'll get to the easiest of categories, and that's performance. Now, while I did have some performance differences in the previous season because I had models from different years, all of these are running modern, if not the most recent, very close to recent processors, And so their performance in day-to-day use is incredible. I'm not going to benchmark these and show you the numbers differences, but it really won't make a difference in day-to-day use because all of these will feel incredibly fast. And so for that reason, I'm going to give 3 stars to all of them. And let me know down in the comments if you're not happy about that. Now let's talk about software and updates. Now I won't make this an iOS versus Android battle because that is purely a matter of preference. I will say that though I'm not the biggest fan of iOS, I am really impressed with iOS 14 on the iPhone 11. Not only does it feel smoother, but also it's added a large number of features that I think were heavily needed to make iOS feel like it's got a new coat of paint. And so the experience, along with the always consistent software updates, will give the iPhone 11 3 stars in this one. LG has a lot of work to do on their software before I can really consider it as my daily driver. And so the experience on the LG V60 for me was a huge disappointment. And combine that with the fact that LG is not consistent when it comes to updates, I have to give LG 0 stars here. For the Galaxy S20 FE, what can I say? I'm a One UI fan. And I didn't think I'd say that just a few short years ago. Frankly, I always had problems with Samsung software, but I think it's gotten a lot better in recent years. Now, when it comes to software updates, they are claiming that they're going to be pushing more and more towards 3 years of software support. But if we look at the Galaxy S10, we're still waiting on Android 11, which was released in September. And so Samsung will actually have to follow up with that commitment and show that they can actually push out updates quickly. So for that reason, I'm going to give the Galaxy S20 FE 2 stars here. Xiaomi's software experience is an acquired taste that I have yet to understand. There are a lot of frustrations that I had with the software on the Xiaomi 10T, Mi 10T, especially when it comes to just very simple things like using the keyboard. And I had the same issues with the Poco F2 Pro earlier this year, and the responses to that were, why are you using the stock ROM? You should install a custom ROM. I'm really an out-of-box experience guy, and so for that reason, I just can't deal with the Xiaomi 10T's software, and I don't know when they will get software updates, especially for imported phones like mine. So for that reason, I'm also going to give it 0 stars. And then finally, the OnePlus 8. I've always loved the software experience on OnePlus phones. I think it's absolutely incredible. And I think with the most recent update, I probably am alone in saying that it's only gotten better. I think there are a lot of OnePlus fans who are not happy with the fact that it's getting to look more like One UI in certain ways. But what I really appreciate is the fact that now we have an always-on display, which we've been asking for forever. And so for that reason, I love the software. Now, when it comes to updates, now obviously OnePlus has always said that they are king of software updates, but the OnePlus 7T is still waiting on its Android 11 update and will likely not get it until 2021, probably early 2021. And when you think about it, that's in line with Samsung, and that's not really a good benchmark to set yourself against. So for that reason, I'm only going to give the OnePlus 8 2 stars in software until they can prove to me that they are consistent on software updates again. Now let's talk about the cameras. While the iPhone 11 now is a little bit outdated when it comes to camera performance, I still think this was such a huge leap over former iPhones that I would still rate the cameras on this 3 stars. Now you're only getting 2 lenses, but frankly I don't find a lot of use for most telephoto lenses, and so good on you, iPhone. When it comes to the LG V60, I fully expected to love the pictures coming out of the LG V60 and was very disappointed. Most of the pictures were a lot flatter than I expected, and it really didn't paint a picture and really didn't make the experience, bring the experience out into the picture. And that, in combination with the fact of taking pictures on the LG V60 is tougher, I'm going to give it 2 stars here. The Galaxy S20 FE was incredibly impressive and took excellent pictures, just like most other Samsung flagships this year. Now, maybe it doesn't compete with the top cameras this year, but I was completely happy with having this in my pocket and never felt like that I was missing out on a good shot, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. The Mi 10T has an impressive camera setup, and I did get some really striking pictures out of it, but for the most part, I actually was disappointed when it came to some of the white balance and exposure that I get on photos. Sometimes I found that even in bright daylight, the Xiaomi would completely miss when it comes to exposing the shot. And so something that was light gray would be blown out to white. I don't know if this was a bug or anything like that, but for that reason, I'm only going to give the Xiaomi 1 star here. The OnePlus 8's camera setup is quite impressive, and you can get some incredible photos out of it, but there were a couple lighting conditions that I really fell behind on, so for that reason, I'm going to give it 2 stars. Finally, let's talk about everything else. And this is a catch-all category for everything I didn't think fits naturally into the 5 categories, but still is kind of paramount to the experience of using these phones. So let's start off with the iPhone 11. Now I know that Apple could have never guessed that we'd be all in a pandemic this year and all have to wear masks. But for me, the experience of having to manually type in my PIN every single time I want to unlock my phone or use it for tap and pay or even install an application in public is very, very frustrating. And so for that reason, I have to give Apple 0 stars here. Of course, they couldn't have seen this whole thing coming, but because they opted into Face ID, they are way behind when it comes to the experience of unlocking your phone. The LG V60 has an under-display fingerprint sensor, which means you can unlock it while wearing a mask. And it's okay. It's really quite a bit worse than, in my experience, than the S20FEs and the OnePlus 8s, but it works completely fine. And I will give it to LG that they do still have a headphone jack, which is great for some people, and they have the option to upgrade to the dual screen functionality, which is unlike any other phone you see on this table. Completely unique experience, and therefore I'm going to give LG 3 stars here. The S20FE doesn't have a lot special going for it. The under-display fingerprint sensor, in my mind, is quite incredible, but outside of that, it's a pretty standard phone, and for that reason, I'll give it 2 stars. The Mi 10T has a side-mounted fingerprint sensor in what is one of the cheapest feeling power buttons that I've used on a phone this year. I really don't like the experience of unlocking this phone, and that's largely because the consistency and the frequency of which it gets it right is just so much less than most other fingerprint sensors that I really would have preferred just a back-mounted fingerprint sensor or an under-display fingerprint sensor. And so for that reason, I'm going to give the Mi 10T 1 star. And then the OnePlus 8 has a pretty consistent under-display fingerprint sensor that I found was quite good. And then it also has the mute slider, which is an extra bonus. So I'll give the OnePlus 8 3 stars. And I know the iPhone has a mute slider as well, but I'm not going to give it any stars because the experience of unlocking it is so bad. Okay, now let's tally the results, do some quick math, and yep, the Galaxy S20 FE is my favorite phone for under $500. It just checks all the boxes to be an absolutely excellent phone, and the fact that you can get it for a good price is just that much better. Now, obviously, there's some people that won't be a big fan of the S20 FE because they're not a big fan of the plastic back, they don't like Samsung or whatever. But I think for most people, the Galaxy S20 FE is just a consistent, excellent phone with great pictures, an excellent screen, great fingerprint sensor. It just makes sense for me. Now, obviously, the second place winner was the OnePlus 8. And if you look, the OnePlus 8 can be found for actually a very, very cheap price. Like, they're going for anywhere between $350 and $400 if you get them refurbished, which might make them a better deal than the Galaxy S20 FE. I think either of these phones are absolutely excellent. If you watched season 1, then you probably knew that I wasn't going to rank the Mi 10T well, because it's the same out-of-box experience that I got with the Poco F2 Pro, which came in last place last time. And so I just can't recommend this to anyone like me who doesn't want to install a new ROM and experience something different. Now, apart from the Mi 10T, I can absolutely recommend any of these phones for under $500. Because while not all of them are perfect, I think they all offer their own positives or their own advantages that might make them the right phone for you. I think the LG V60 has an incredible differentiation in the fact that it's dual screen. And if you're a huge iOS fan or you're stuck to iMessage, then the iPhone 11 for $500 is a pretty darn good deal. And so for that reason, I don't think you're necessarily going wrong with any of these phones. My personal favorite is the S20FE, and I think this thing is awesome. So if you don't mind Samsung and you're needing a phone under $500, then buy this one. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. How does our new champion compare to our old champion in the OnePlus 7T from last season? Well, I will say that the OnePlus 7T has been dropping more and more in price, so you can get it from anywhere from like $250 to $300, which is pretty darn impressive. And so from a value proposition, I might say that the OnePlus 7T is still the better value, but there are some significant upgrades that you get when opting for the S20FE that frankly I would pay for, especially when it comes to camera experience. So for that reason, I would take the S20FE over the OnePlus 7T, but if I only had $300 to spend, then I'd probably still go for this. I'm excited to read down in the comments what you guys think is the best phone under $500. I'm a little less excited to see all the people that say I'm wrong about everything, but it's subjective. People have preferences. If you think I missed a phone, or you think there's an upcoming phone that I should check out for the next season of phones under $500, let me know down in the comments and I'll do what I can to get it. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.